Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. So we're resuming meeting R1, January 25th, 2011. And as I recall, we got down to item I, Secretary Treasurer's Report, down to item number 1, 2011-12 staffing budget. We had Janice, you had asked to split the motion, so it ended after 3 FTE, and we now will resume with the portion of the motion that reads 1 support staff position and a transfer .6 from the Director of Capital Projects and Planning to the position of District Principal Health and Safety. So, yeah.
I make the following motion, that the Board approve adjusting staffing levels for the 2011-12 annual budget with a reduction of 1 support staff position and a transfer of .6 from Director of Capital Projects and Planning to position of District Principal Health and Safety.
Do you have a seconder?
Second for debate.
Okay, Janice, do you want to open debate?
We had this discussion before. We had a discussion with the senior management team over this. I think they were very clear. Last year, we did approve a budget where we did talk about reducing our staff at the board office, and we did talk about dealing with our WCB claims, and I think this motion deals with what we've talked about in the past and ready to move forward on it.
Anyone else like to speak to this? Dan?
Well, I guess for me, the transfer of the .6, I think should probably go before the budget advisory committee to be taken in context with anything else that we're dealing with in the district, seeing how it is budget time, as opposed to just automatically shifting it over.
Len, did you want to respond to that?
I thought we'd already discussed it.
Says he thinks we've already discussed it there. So are you proposing an amendment, or?
No.
Hey, Fran?
I had some questions and concerns, and one has just been asked about the budget process, because that would have been my guess that that's where it would have started. I'm just wondering if we need a longer discussion or more information. I feel like I need more information in terms of the position, the Director of Capital Projects and Planning. I don't recall hearing that this position was redundant or needed changes in the past, and this may have been spoken about in the past, and I've missed this somehow, but it just seems like a dramatic change for me to go from not hearing about it to eliminating an entire position. And then also wondering if we're in the process of a large-scale facilities review, then does it make sense to deal with those together? Because what if we do need a director or a manager or someone to deal with facilities and planning, or capital projects and planning, rather. The support staff position, and again, I'm not sure if this is, again, thought it seemed like something that we talk about in the budget process, and am concerned, as I would want to hear more, because of the having cut support staff positions over the past few years, and just want to hear more to make sure that support staff aren't quietly being overburdened and just haven't mentioned it. So that would be another question. In terms of the specifically adding or developing the position of the Principal of Health and Safety, I would wonder why it would be an educational position as opposed to an operations position, because it seems operational to me, and I just wouldn't understand why it would be administrative. Now, we obviously have a principal very gifted with incredible expertise in this area. So if this makes sense in terms of dealing with it this way on a temporary basis, that seems logical to me. I'd be concerned about developing and there's no suggestion that it has been, but developing a position, a district principal position for a person on a long-term permanent basis. And again, because this position has only been in place for about a month, and when we heard about it and a number of concerns raised by members of the public about this were addressed in terms of it being temporary, so it just seems quick to me to shift it from temporary to permanent. Why didn't you say that?
Sure. Fairly long question. I'll see if I can hit all the points, and I've got a few others I would like to sort of make at the end. So certainly the capital coordinator position, the duties we are looking for the director and the manager of operations to pick up. There is no capital project per se on the books right now. We've been sort of skinnying along as best we can with those few small ones we have today. You know, I don't want to use the word portables. The modular units, not portables, you know. So those kind of projects we've been keeping it going, but it was always in my mind, even when we went back and we did that last 5-year agreement with the capital coordinator, was that it was likely to end at that 5 years. So it goes back to that period of time. So around the support position, there is a change in our leave system, and a lot of the duties that were associated with that manual leave system are no longer needed, so that's why that position is up. I'm using a principal, so I'll go back in a minute to some of the other ones, but I'll talk about this one here. When we needed to investigate WorkSafe BC for the Brooklyn, the air quality, remember, a lot of the discussions that came to us, they were really interested in having it be at a higher level. There was a lot of their concern was that the CEO be at the meetings and that it be sort of lifted in sort of elevation to a profile to where it would be handled in a slightly different manner. So certainly part of that is coming from that area. And as you mentioned, he's certainly the person who has the correct skills. And I think as just as an aside to it, of course, we talk about earthquake preparedness, emergency planning, which would be an area we'd like to improve too, even beyond the WorkSafe would be his area in this one. So just maybe for a little more facts for it, in 2006, our cost for the year for WorkSafe was $257,000. Our estimate for this year is $480,000. I think you can see where if you actually put this position in place and we can actually turn this around, the savings are pretty significant. And we also at this time still have School Street number 23 helping us out with the claims. I wouldn't say we've dropped that right away, but we would look at dropping that, which should save a further $25,000. I think there's anything else I need to hit here. I think that covered it.
Did you have a follow-up there?
Yeah. Is there any downside to this being a temporary position or a time-limited position? The district principal, yeah.
Well, are you saying beyond 1 year or just for the 6 months? I'm not clear.
Because my understanding is that this is 1 year in addition to the 6 months, but the way it's worded, it would sound as if it's becoming a permanent position.
Sure. Well, I guess with the proviso that every year we look at the budget anyway, and if you, I suppose if you kick off the spot where you thought you could, reduce it, then we would look at it. As we look at everything, we do every year, review the whole staff and the board ops level and the duties, and try and realign them if we can.
Sherry, did you want to?
Maybe I could just add, because I was part of the discussion, the initial discussion about the difference between going out into the field once again and looking for someone from the private sector to come in from private practice into a public education institute. And we wrestled with that for a little bit of time, and we got to the conclusion that part of the decision about choosing an educator as the leader of the health and safety was the huge need that we have, as most districts do, around raising awareness around health and safety issues, everything from how are you in compliance for WorkSafe BC, but to all the other pieces around emergency preparedness. And a great deal of the work of that position is to build systems that continue over time that eventually make the position redundant, to be fair. They put themselves out of business once you have systems in place, and we clearly don't have systems in place. But as we looked at the workload and we looked across the province, made some phone calls to other districts, we realized that a very big portion of the immediate work, once you get through all the paper that had been stacking up for the temporary back there, was the idea that we have a long road to journey around raising both our employee awareness, our community awareness, around the systems that need to be in place around health and safety. And that really, truly, in many ways, could be better done by an educator who is used to doing that kind of work and building those kind of systems, has that higher level of profile that WorkSafe, we have encountered WorkSafe, and also the higher level of profile, perhaps, in the school community with both their principal and vice principal colleagues and their school communities. So we went back and forth about whether, and we had looked out, and we got some help from BCPC, and actually asked about when these similar kinds of positions in other districts had become vacant, what kind of interest did they get from across the country as they advertised, and what kind of credentials did those people have, what level of training did they have, and they are, to a district, having great difficulty filling them. There isn't a good alignment between private sector and public education particularly, and that many of them had gone to a similar hybrid model of having someone in some kind of, someone from the education ranks holding some kind of directorship, district principalship, manager positions. We called them different things. But got to a place where they had themselves had difficulty filling those positions. Our current need is emergent. We have a whole lot of things that stacked up because of the vacancy of an employee. Our growing need in the next couple of years is to develop systems and raise awareness and educate ourselves and our public so that we get to a place where that position makes itself obsolete, so that things begin to move in a predictable, consistent manner, because we don't currently have that. So we landed eventually, with all that research, into a place where the position, not the person, we happen to right now have a good backfill, the position that we believe we need is someone who can do as much of the educational piece of it as the actual filling out the forms for WorkSafe BC. Because we are hoping we get to a place where that's the minor part of it. It's the other work that needs to be done, the bigger picture stuff. So that's how we got landed in a position of this.
Tom?
So thank you for clarifying comments and yours as well, Len, in addition to the briefing note. So I'll be supporting the motion. The information is very helpful. I do sort of view this as management's work. This is your work to do. And while I'm appreciative of you bringing it forward or being brought forward to the board table, I see it as an information thing. So I have confidence in the work that you do and the planning that you do, and we'll support it on that basis.
I'm also quite supportive of this. I think that perhaps in the next year and a half, if that's what we're talking about, there's an opportunity to really look at what those terms of reference need to be. But I do entirely endorse the need for the position right now, and a need for health and safety to take a broader perspective than just being focused on the staff. In my capacity as a PAC and a DPAC member in previous times, we many times had issues come up from the schools where there were health and safety issues. Emergency preparedness was one, but there were also the famous lice check policy changes and things like that, where it was often, so well, that would get referred to the health and safety officer, but that person was not the right person. We're talking about a position which has an educational component. It has a planning and a stakeholder consultation role. It has the effectiveness of what we do is really dependent on a lot of in-services and consistent upgrading and responsiveness, not just for staff, but also for parents as well in many cases. So I think this is really a position that we need. I know we may not always have the current candidate with his particular background, but I would hope that we would identify terms of reference for the position that would continue to bring those skills in, whether it's a full-time or part-time position. It's been something that I sure saw the need for, 3 or 4 years ago, and entirely endorse that we do it.
Okay, and for me, we just have one opportunity to speak to it, Frank. For me, while I think I endorse this in principle, I'm not sure that I'm ready to vote in favor of it today, and I'd just like to explain why. One is the director of capital projects. That was a self-funding position, and if my memory is correct, I think on our seismic upgrade, these saved us some millions of dollars. So We got pretty good value for the money there, and he did a good job. But I think that if you're not seeing a need for that position or the other one, correct me if I'm wrong, but I agree with Tom that I would see that as manager's work, and it's not something really that comes to the board. However, adding another position to the board office, which is how I'm looking at this one, I guess it is. It's a budget issue to me, I think. And I'm not in favor of approving this outside of the budget process. I was at a couple of the budget advisory committee meetings, and I'm not sure that I recall it being discussed that much. But, you know, for me personally, I find I'm in a difficult position trying to explain this to the public when, you know, they ask us, why have you cut challenge positions, or why have you cut other things in the district? So for me, I would like some more information. However, I would like to acknowledge that this probably is something that is required. I believe it was a couple of years ago, the district recognized there were some issues, so the district in Kamloops were contracted. Apparently that's not realizing any gains for us, so if we're going backwards. So I would like to know more about that, because we have already spent money trying to improve things and why that's not working. And also, the operational review actually identified that there was an issue with WorkSafe BC claims, and that was an independent third-party review that's seeing the same thing that you're identifying today. So I think there's good evidence that we need it. But for me, it's I need a little more information so I can explain this better to people. And second, I think it needs to come in the context of the full budget process so that we can consider all additions at the same time.
I'm just a little confused about how that might work necessarily. We have the staff, and we try and do now because of the ramifications of what happens if we don't get all these decisions made. And things maybe as we go down the road later would be more difficult to move people around. Like for instance, if this one would have decided not to, then where are we going to place Paul if that's the case next year? So that would be just sort of some of the ramification. Just to your comment about School 623, we did have some significant wins, but and those were where we were starting to appeal some particular awards that in the past should have been challenged, but were not. So they've given them some cash from back in time. They've actually paid for their own costs, if you like, and some. So we're not losing out on that one at all. But I'm still curious then, if it's not here, how that then comes in.
Well, we haven't had a community budget meeting yet. You know, I know last year we had a meeting with senior staff and the principals, vice principals to talk about budget. So for me, this is outside of the budget process, and I would like to consider it personally. Maybe my colleagues don't agree, but inside of the budget process. Okay. Do you want to close?
I do. I feel that this position is a position that is needed in this district. I believe the comments tonight we had about the previous WCP claims and how they've gone up, this position will pay itself off in a heartbeat. I don't believe that it's running straight to the budget. We had this conversation. We've talked about our WCP claims for the last number of years. It's an issue in this district we're looking at dealing with this. This position will deal with this issue. It will also deal with the issue of health and safety and the well-being of our district. We've had a couple of incidents, if you all recall, where we had the flooding, where we had to have some evacuations and some worry about students across the side, whatever. This position would be also help in a situation like that. And although I wasn't here in 1948, my mother was a student in the school district in 1948 when this district had an earthquake. I'm well aware of what happens with earthquakes in school districts, so I got that growing up in my family, what happened in this district in 1948. So I believe, what? 46, okay, somewhere else. I wasn't born back then. Okay, all I remember is my mom and my dad. So I believe this position is something that we've talked about in the last couple of years. I think it's time to move forward, deal with it, get the health and safety of our students, our teachers, and our staff in the community, and move forward. So I would hope the rest of the board will support seniors management position on this one here, because I think it is a positive move. It would be a proactive move and something our district needs to do.
Okay, so Debbie, if you could please read the motion back.
The board support the 2011-12 staffing budget with a reduction to one support staff position and a transfer of .6 from the Director of Capital Projects and Planning to the position of District Principal Health and Safety.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. And retirement and resignations.
That would be me.
Yeah, you.
Page 54, so is this announcing one retirement? Cora Pullen, the counselor at JP Vanier, will retire, had retired January 31st already after 25 years of service to the district, and she will be recognized at the board function in June.
Thank you. Motion to receive management report.
So moved.
Okay, thank you. Next we'll go on to committee reports. Mr. White.
Okay, Finance Committee. The board will remember that they referred back the issue of use of school facilities to the Finance Committee. They come back with a recommendation, and our recommendation is to come back and refer the matter to the Education Committee because it's going to take a bigger discussion than just a few trustees and one staff. Those approved increases last spring. It placed some of the community groups in a position where either you're going to bankrupt them or you're going to push them out of our facility into something else that is probably less preferable for them. Most of the ones that we're concerned about are the ones where they're volunteer run and deal with our students. So we would like to have that discussion with the entire board to see how they feel. As such, I would move that we refer this matter to the Education Committee for discussion.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried.
Receipt of the Education Committee report.
Thank you. There wasn't a policy advisory committee meeting. Education Committee, Corrine couldn't be here this evening. She had a family emergency. So you see the report here. If anyone has any comments or anything to make. I would like to comment with respect to the second item, the challenge program. My understanding from the presentation was that perhaps the teacher thought that it might be something that we would consider in our budget process to add some sort of an FTE to support project-based learning assistance for teachers in the district. So somebody would go and do the training, is how I heard that. And I would say that if the challenge department feels that they should do that, they should probably put forward a recommendation to the budget process. That's how I heard the presentation.
Madam Chair, we'll just clarify that with Director Schatz. Is that your understanding of what happened in the Education Committee? That the teacher requested that to be considered, project-based learning to be considered?
It wasn't my understanding, no.
I didn't take it as a request, but I think that was her thought, that this could be, that things seem to be going well, and it could be expanded to help teachers in the classroom learn more about project-based learning if there were an FTE added.
So and the normal process would be then that may or may not be something your department then puts forward to the board.
And then the second item was, I think that I heard from Rob Moore's presentation regarding the international student program, that he's requesting maybe that the board have sort of a values discussion around the age of children coming to the school district. So I don't know how we would do that.
So through you, Madam Chair, we thought that perhaps as we move into the springtime that might be an appropriate discussion to at least begin at Education Committee. We thought that might be the best venue for that conversation. It's an educational big picture item, and at least we could begin to explore that with you, and you could give us some direction about the kind of information you might need to have that sort of more. It's more of a philosophical question than it is anything.
Yeah.
But Education Committee, when we look at the venues we have, would probably be amongst those that exist now the best place for that, at least to start. So with more indulgence, that's probably what we would do unless we go on that.
Is everyone all right with that? Okay.
Okay.
Sheila?
Can I just go back to the challenge thing? Dean, I went to one of the 4D presentations today with Dr. Janica Frank, Denise Frank, whatever. It's fantastic, so interesting. Here, working with staff around challenge programs, effective practices. I think she's doing a speech tomorrow to parents. Is that pre-registered or available?
I think it's available to anyone who would like to go.
Yeah, it was really very, very, very interesting perspective on, how programs can address the needs and how we identify who our gifted students are, and it was very interesting.
And may I just ask your indulgence for one little piece, and mostly because I'd like to get in front of this before you hear about it on the news. And it isn't something that I've done, which is usually
Not that there's anything.
usually just before it hits the news. But this one actually has got nothing to do with it. Imagine our delight and our surprise this morning when the Secretary Treasurer and I opened our emails to discover that Arden Elementary is receiving some capital, what would we call that? Capital allocation money to address their heating, light, and water issues.
Is this a 7-year project?
It is. It's on the list, like the
Yeah.
roasting list.
Yeah, okay.
And so the good news is that there is how much money? $709,000 coming in to address some of those issues at Arden. The better news is that there could potentially be a photo opportunity with the Minister of Energy and something else. Mr. John Yap might be here in the Valley at Arden School to announce that. And
you take a good picture.
Really,
you look
you know what color
fantastic
my
in the
face will be?
newspaper.
It'll be just as red as your shirt. So this could potentially happen on Thursday. It's good news. We were surprised because it's been on a list for a long time, and it was like a roasted thing, and it may not have been at the top of our list, but it's always good to get money from the government to, and Arden's one of our older elementary schools. It's a school that is going to be full to capacity in the next couple of years and potentially needing some upgrade around space. So the fact that we could end up with a new heating and lighting and HVAC kind of system is good news for us, and you never turn money away. Never do you ever turn it back. But we were a little bit surprised this morning. We thought you'd be more surprised when you saw it on the check 6 years on Thursday. So that's what it is. It's something that the ministry does as they have their own internal prioritizing about which projects to support, and we were lucky today.
And prepared for an
prepared
election.
for it.
It's always good for money.
So that's the good news for Arden Elementary.
Excellent. That is exciting. Okay. So, we'll go ahead with that then. Somebody want to move receipt of the education report? Thank you. Okay, board appointees to other bodies. Len, is that yours or?
The Tribune Daily one, if you want to share.
Yeah.
There was, I think, the last, several meetings ago, there was a notice that the contract actually had an error in it, so that was corrected on page 66. The reference to the administrator was corrected, and so they brought that to you. I'm not sure if there was some further questions people had about their agreement.
Do you want to make questions?
To read the motion?
Go for it.
That the board approves the tripartite and governing contract as presented.
Seconder?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? As carried. Thank you.
Do you have to do the second motion as well?
I move that the board appoint the following as directors to the Tribune Day Outdoor Education Society. Len Ebb, Secretary Treasurer, Sheila McDonnell, I'm having a bad day talking. Sheila McDonnell, Trustee, Jared Abel, Teacher, SD 71, Hugh McKinnon, Vice Principal, Glacier Secondary, SD 71.
Second? Anybody?
Second.
Any discussion? Well, thank you, Sheila and Len, for agreeing to go on this committee, and thank you to Mr. Abel and Mr. McKinnon as well. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you.
Maybe Janice, would you be okay? I'm assuming you went on Saturday, so.
I went. Sure, and I did a road trip on Saturday. That any trustees wishing to attend the Vancouver Island Trustee Association branch meeting February 5th, 2011 will do so from required board business.
Seconder?
Seconded.
Just thinking what would happen if we were to defeat them.
I don't know, it'd be like Groundhog Day.
I would go anyways without your permission.
Okay, yeah, this should have happened on January 25th, so. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Janice, would you mind giving us an update, or?
Actually, no, I'll do it to the next meeting. There was quite a lot of information going on, and I think there's some required board discussion, so if you wouldn't mind, I will do my report at the next board meeting. We'll have a conversation. And you're all in the know. I won't bring surprises on you guys.
Okay. All right, another motion here.
That any trustees wishing to attend the BC School Trustees Association AGM April 14th to 17th, 2011 may do so from required board business.
Second.
Any discussion?
Thank you, Debbie, for registering us this morning.
All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. So we have 4 items of new business here from trustees, so just ask that we follow the following format, that the trustee, whose item it is, makes the motion, and then speaks to it, and then we'll go in sequence. People can make comments, and then the trustee making the motion can close, and then we'll vote. If you would like a different process than that, you do have a couple of options. One, that you could refer something to the Education Committee. For your information, we are having Education Committee tomorrow night. And because we had the crystal ball out, we thought that that one item that we referred tonight would get referred, but that's the only item there. So we could have a fuller discussion on something else if you wish. Or if you would like an opportunity to provide some background information, I'll just look at Len and make sure this is okay, and sort of a committee of the whole format prior to making the motion. You can also do that. Okay? Sheila, take it away.
Okay, well, I had sent an email, it's in the agenda package, with a motion that I didn't receive any suggested changes to, so I do move that the trustees establish a task force to research, consult with members of the community, and of course with our staff, regarding the establishment of a foundation to support public education in the Comox Valley, and bring back a preliminary recommendation in April.
Second for discussion.
Okay?
Okay, the background information that I sent to you refers to some of the other districts which have charitable foundations. Now, I know that in our district we do have a capacity to issue tax receipts. I'm not sure if the public are really aware of that. We have a number of different places where fundraising grants are received and funds are held. We have some substantial funds that are held in the district, which the ministry always seems to think we should be spending. And I just think that a foundation might be a vehicle for us to, and there's so many multiple uses. One is when you create a vehicle that has that's a little bit at arm's length from the board's work, for one thing, but we might have a capacity to consolidate some of the granting and small funds, scholarship funds that we currently hold, that we might be able to generate better income from. I was very impressed with what the Calgary Board of Education have done. They have several $1 million in assets that are coming back every year. The interest goes back. And something like they have a pledge for $5 million over a 5-year period. So one thing that a foundation does, which is different from in regular nonprofits or charities, is it can create a vehicle where people are prepared to leave substantial amounts of money. Whereas you might make a donation of $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 for something, you wouldn't necessarily leave your entire estate or $1 million to a school, an individual school PAC or something. Whereas the foundation allows people to have confidence that they are establishing an endowment that will be used in perpetuity. The foundations that I looked into, there's one in Ladysmith and Nanaimo, one in Calgary. And there are quite a few of them. They often also have a function of being a clearinghouse for what they call flow-through grants. Those are the kinds of things like our community links or our Art School Community Connection grants. And by bringing them together and having some expertise around grant management, around applications, leverage, helping people at the school level build their programs, they appear to be getting a lot of benefit from those. There's somebody there, and I know in the district we've talked about having a grant writer before, but you need a grant writer who really is connected to the program implementation as well. And districts can really leverage a lot more. They can enter into some serious partnerships. The Calgary School Board is in a multi-year partnership with Indian and Northern Affairs around addressing their Aboriginal student needs. So I think there's an opportunity to do some really creative things. In and of itself, whether you ever receive endowments, I think that foundations become an opportunity to put the word out about your cause. And in our case, it's about public education. It's about all the wonderful things that the school district does, that volunteers and partners come in and do with us. And so I think it would be very suitable. Now, there are possible drawbacks. We know that even in fundraising nonprofits, people can get turfy. We know there's a lot of fundraising going on in the Valley. We have an existing community foundation that we might, in fact, be able to create a special public education fund within them. We have to address the schools' need to have their own funds. Usually, the ones that I've looked at, they do that. They will have a general school district fund, and they may have specific ones for music or for sports or for a particular school. We got very excited looking at one in Vancouver. They had $80 million, incredible endowments. Turns out it was Vancouver, Washington, and they've been in existence for over 20 years. But it is nice to think about where we could get if we start. And I see a real opportunity to bring in some people in the community who might have a real interest and a passion and link to their particular group and link very successfully around fundraising issues for art or music or the environment. So I'd just like an opportunity, I'm proposing an opportunity for us to look into this further and get some ideas about how it would work, talk to people in the community, see whether there's a general support for it, and then come back and bring it back to board.
Thank you. Anyone like to speak to that? Then?
Just a bit of background for what we already do, just so people know sort of where we started. It's a very generous community that we live in. We have about $700,000 actually already that we keep for bursaries. We have had actually some small estates given with the James Small bursary, which funds a student in the medical area, like to be a doctor or those kind of things. So it exists in the Valley. Certainly, we have expanded what we take in terms of looking at being able to take shares in stocks. This is the Director of Finance, Ron Amos, did just recently, so we've actually made that available to people, and we've also worked now to try and, in a low-interest environment, to actually do more investments. So that's something we've worked with the Royal Bank of Canada as well, to try and see if we can increase some of what we get. But certainly it's still, something that's not off the side of our desk almost, as opposed to the kind of an organization that we might be discussing here. So I think it's an idea that has merit. I think the hard part is, it's part of our job, so we do it, and we do what we can with it. But if it was to become more, it would certainly have to be something that you'd have to have people willing to step up, and a board of directors as well. But it's a good idea.
Well, for me, I have an open mind. I got to say, honestly, I'm a little uncomfortable with public education needing sort of a fundraising group. It sort of goes against a bit what I think. But we do, I think, already have some really good connections in the community with folks. I know there's two examples I'd like to give that I've heard about recently. One is that I believe it's at Arden School, the Rotary. They have a connection with that school somehow, and they bought a bunch of guitars for the school. I think it's a $3,000 gift. And then there's sort of one of our local famous musicians who's an exceptionally good guitar player and good singer and makes fun of the board from time to time. I heard that he was going to go and give guitar lessons. So like, there's a really good connection on a smaller scale. And I believe there's a group of professional engineers that are getting together to do some fundraising around robotics kits and things. So like, there's some good things happening already. And I think that's pretty cool that people are connected to the school district in that way. So while I'm a little hesitant, I have an open mind, and for me, I don't know, did you work with senior staff on this concept at all?
We had a few conversations in passing, saying, and in fact, well, the idea came from some conversations that I'd had with Doug Cox. We were talking on the phone about music in the district, and he asked, how does the district do fundraising? What are those needs? And I thought, that's a person who would be an ideal board member, where you have people who are very much committed to their particular interest and who are very embedded in a different type of community. And so then I started to research and find out, are they being done? And of course, Sherry knew about the one in the Nanaimo district, and I had heard about the Calgary one. And I just felt, I totally agree that we're doing it, and we have the capacity to do it. But there's something about creating a group of people for whom it is their first thing, and the message that they can communicate is as much about sharing what is working as an opportunity that may then bring fruit back to us. It's quite amazing when you look at the websites and start to think, aha, and that aha, and I want to be part of that, is much more significant than if it's a note somewhere on our webpage or a thought in passing. And I'm interested to see where it goes.
Okay, so for me, I would actually like to see this just go to staff to do some work. I don't think this should be a task force established by the board. I don't see this as board work at all. I see the development and checking into this as staff work personally. So that's how I would go. Did I see Tom stand up?
You did.
Yeah.
But I think was it a question or a response?
Still have a question in response to that point.
So I'll defer until, so you can complete that thought, and then I'll have my comments.
That's the many thoughts. Well, specifically about, I do actually...
That's it. The truest thing I've heard today.
I do actually think that it's board business. I think it's about the part of going beyond what our current operations are and about engaging with the public. And I think that part is the part that's entirely appropriate for the board. I don't think that it would be appropriate to do it over their interests and without bearing in mind what that means for the work that they do. But I do think in terms of communicating with the public and partners and doing some more research, it seems to me that is one that might really fit what we could be doing to support our district and connect with our constituency.
Well, help sell me a little bit further on this. What does the task force look like to you? In your motion, what were you envisioning?
A task force looks like a couple of board members who would make some phone calls, do some research, connect, maybe invite some of the key players to a meeting and work with Len and Sherry on the issue to say what could it look like.
Okay, Tom?
So I want to sort of thank you for the sort of creative intent behind this. It's good to talk about something that has potential. The motion in itself doesn't commit us to anything. It commits us to considering something or at least investigating. Even by virtue of what's been shared tonight, and some of it, admittedly, I didn't know about the Arden circumstance. So we have pockets of, and it would be nice to perhaps see if we could meld that together to get a clear sense of what we have and where perhaps we could go. In the past, I worked with publicly funded organizations, and they did have foundations that were set up, and the foundations weren't set up to make any type of political statements, we're augmenting because you're not getting enough money. It was never those. It was just an opportunity for individuals in the community who wanted to participate, or whether they were former employees of that particular organization or former consumers of the services of that organization, or just folks who were looking for a spot to donate, other than in their local communities. So I had to send questions, so I appreciate you asking the question, what does a task force actually look like? And I'm quite comfortable with the direction that Sheila described. My only hesitation around the motion itself is the time frame. April does seem like a long way away, but it's really not. And given that we're in budget season and a whole bunch of other things going on, I just want to make sure that there is enough time to allow.
Preliminary recommendation, meaning there might be another one further down.
Question, does this look like a board ad hoc committee at all?
Madam, probably not. One of the things that we'll need to do, there's some serious parameters around school district designing these kinds of things. So one of your first questions of us would be, so what are the mechanics, the liabilities, the parameters put on by the ministry around gap procedures, for example, like the accounting of that. So we could certainly get some of that stuff done, look at some examples. Like I'm familiar with the Nanaimo one, and it was basically created around scholarship money. It really is the ebb and flow of scholarship money, and whether or not, and it has evolved slightly differently, but really it is really, the essence of it is about scholarships. So we have another mechanism for that, but it might be something we look at. We could probably come back with something that is at first blush, what's possible, and what are the guiding parameters and guiding principles we might need to have by April. Wouldn't certainly have a whole lot of the consultation. We need a bit more direction from the board philosophically about the consultation with the community and what that might look like. But we could bring back some structural information about what it could look like and has to look like, what it can do and what it can't do, because we have some work to do around all of that piece first. And we could do that by April.
You say that that's pre-task force work then?
Yeah, I would say, because what if we come back and we present to you a case that is so restrictive in its ability to do the work that perhaps Trustee McNall would like it to do, that you move in a different direction?
Does that take Well, I sure wish people didn't know back on January 17th. Okay, I think that's all very valid information, but I also I think that it might be timely to just put some feelers out and see if there's an interest and address some of those questions.
Okay, so we have two thoughts here, and I think it would be useful for the board to weigh in on this. Did you go ahead, though?
I did. I like it in principle, and I talked to the trustees in Nanaimo, and it does very well. And I have concerns, I think Sherry and Len echoed, is the logistics, the practicality, and the task force. And I think to me it's a two-stage approach. I think it's them coming back and saying this is how we do it, and then the task force would be sort of after that. I would call it step A and step B. That's how I look at it here. It's coming back with saying that, can it be done? This is what we're looking at, and these are your parameters around doing it. And then coming back and saying, as a goal, then with the task force. Because to me, I hate to have the task force and then come back and saying it's not going to work. But I also remember Helene McGall, the infamous Helene McGall, and the grant writing that she wrote and all the money that she got when she was in district having something at the time. So I see the potential, and I see it out there supporting the students in our district. So I see the potential. I would like to go forward, and I would like to go cautionally, and I would support this motion if we could do in two parts. Management come back to us with how it's going to look logistically, and then move forward on whether we want to go to the task force. So I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for, but I think that would encompass the concerns, the questions that I've heard.
You meant the famous Helene McGall, not the infamous.
Famous. Sorry. Right, sorry.
Metaphor. Anyone else have Fran and then Danny?
I think if we have to put preliminary information first, then the task force will be more educated and be able to ask better questions in terms of what's feasible and what's not feasible. So that makes sense. I like the idea. It's creative, and so much of the time we're continuing with what we've already been working on. So saying something completely new that we haven't talked about before, I think is really refreshing. So I just, again, I'm open to whatever makes sense logistically to get there. And this suggestion just seemed to fit without precluding a task force at all, but just delaying it.
Okay.
For me, I'd be happy with management coming up with some of the positives and negatives. when I start to hear about Nanaimo's, and theirs is mainly around scholarships and bursaries. I think the majority of that $700,000 that we hold for scholarships and bursaries are directed at specific criteria, and that criteria is set up when the people make the donations initially. So I would have to say I'd be more than happy to turn it over to these guys and let them come back with, let us know what the good things are and what the bad things are, and make the decisions.
So, for a piece of information, the note here is that from the Nanaimo School Board's one, that it did start as a financial awards society, but it will now be constituted as the Nanaimo Lady Smith Schools Foundation with full charitable status. New community members have joined the board of directors, and a fundraising program will be initiated, and it is to widen its focus, specifically to widen its focus. So, just to wrap up, I think that I see no reason to not establish the task force now and wait for management to come back. I see the two things happening together. I really think that it does nothing but delay. And since we know that our management are bound by existing policies, we're not going to get something new necessarily. We always get good advice from them, but I think it's up to us to take some steps forward. I think that the task force, one of the tasks would be to get this information to support senior management in focusing on what the questions and the issues are. But I feel like it's not it's not about existing operations. It has to link with existing operations and be compatible. But the big questions about, can we do something? Should we do something? I'm not convinced that we would in the end move forward, but I think that's part of the task force. You start and ask those questions, get all kinds of information. So, interesting. There we go.
Just trying to figure out how to make this work for everybody. I think
it's not going to work. You're going to vote it down.
No, and I don't think that we should.
There's a
I don't
plan
think
B.
there should be a plan B that we make a referral to staff to give us a preliminary report back by April, and we could defer this until voting on your motion until April. I don't think I've heard anybody say tonight that they would like to defeat your motion at all.
I think we have no choice, having made a motion. Having not made a motion, that was meeting.
Can you make a motion to defer it would be a way?
Make a subsequent motion. I guess I felt I'd already consulted on some of the technical side of it. It's interesting.
So it is difficult when we have those little one-off conversations, that are not at the board table with everybody here and everybody having the benefit of hearing everything. It does make it more difficult for some of us coming to the table, So, Len? Okay.
Madam Chair, I think maybe it could be a task force of one, because I sort of see two pieces in here. I think where people might want to go out to the community and find out what they do and bring that back to us as well. So that way we're sort of covering off. We're not sort of going out there saying, here's what we're going to do, but find out what people do, find out how they do it, and it would help inform us as the staff of what it looks like out in the community, and we can do the rigor around those sort of things that we need to be concerned about. And the two of them probably make a slightly better report.
I guess for me, I just would have a concern, thinking sort of from the board's perspective, that we haven't committed to going forward with anything, and I would hate for, like Sheila, to be in a position where it looks like we're going to go forward with something and then not. But I wonder if maybe the three of you could be an initial task force and put your heads together and agree to how it would work. What do you think of that?
Well, then I think that's establishing a task force to look at it and come back with a preliminary report. So I'm good with that one.
So motion to call the question.
Okay, we have a motion to call the question. So what do we need? How much of a vote, Mr. Ibbs, do we need to carry this one? 2/3?
Wow.
Needs a majority.
Is it a simple majority on call the question?
I'm not aware of anything special in this one.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, are you saying call the question?
Yeah, no, she's made a motion to call the question, so I guess, do I need a seconder for that?
Is everyone spoken?
Well, I've been
Everyone's
called
spoken.
onto the carpet and spanked for this one once, so I'm going
Everyone
to do
has
it
spoken.
correctly. It doesn't matter if they've spoken. Trustee Caton has the floor, and she's duly made the motion. I think it needs to be seconded.
Okay.
Somebody want to second that motion?
I believe Sheila was closing debate, was she not?
Janice had the floor and called the question. Does anybody want to second the motion?
Sure, I'll second the motion, we might as well move on.
Okay, so all those in favor of calling the question? Opposed? And that is carried. So Debbie, if you could read the motion back, please.
That the board establish a task force to research and consult with members of the community regarding the establishment of a foundation to support public education in Comox Valley, bringing back a preliminary recommendation in April 2011.
Everybody's clear on that? Mm-hmm. Just to clarify that the task force would be established as Len, Sherry, and Sheila. Okay? All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much, Sheila.
Thank you all.
Okay, so I have to apologize to you for the second item. Your briefing note didn't make it onto the agenda. There was, I guess, an edit required, and it never made it there. So thank you very much for photocopying it and providing it with us for us here. So did you want to make a motion on this one, or did you want to just have a discussion?
Well, you would like to follow this thing, so I will move that we request the superintendent and staff to prepare a report on the status of emergency preparedness in School District 71, including a planning budget, a framework, and a timeline to bring our resources and training to appropriate standards. I'll give you this, okay? Yeah.
Do you have a seconder for that?
I seconded the discussion.
Okay, go Sheila.
I started off, this was the day, for a meeting the day before our earthquake drill, and I said at the time that local governments are encouraging residents to participate in the first province-wide earthquake drill, and I know that there were many activities in the schools. It marks the 311th anniversary of the last magnitude 9 earthquake in BC, and in our own area, a 7.3 earthquake in 1946. Which was centered on Forbidden Plateau. I don't think a lot of people know about that. We are at some risk. And at the time, the damage was quite limited because nothing was there. But I think all of you can put your imaginations to work to think about what would happen now. We certainly would have dam breaches and flooding. We would have many buildings falling down, including perhaps some of our schools and homes. We would have bridges out. We have lots of issues. So it is a serious risk. It's not one we can put off. I feel that as a district, we are not prepared. We have pieces of the picture. We have policy, we have manuals, but I would challenge anyone to go into a school and actually have a manual produced. I've done it myself, asking where is the school manual on emergency preparedness, and it was somewhere in the school. No one knew where. We have CCANs, some of which are well stocked at schools, some of which are empty, I think. The reliance on PACs to be the ones who organize is perhaps misguided. And I was wondering today, as I passed the one at ISFAB, if they have one CCAN for their school, is it really going to be enough when we're giving one to each of the elementaries that are much smaller? So I think we have a lot of work to do. There are standards, but they need to be reviewed. And we have made these fits and start efforts. The emergency preparedness has been a big issue at some of our schools. They're perhaps the ones that identify stronger risks. They've done lots of research. They've done work. They have brought it through DPAC to this board several times, and initiatives have been started and not completed. So I believe that we need a focused and consistent effort to establish an up-to-date and adequate plan. We need the funding to be put in place, necessary resources on ongoing monitoring to ensure compliance is kept up. It has been so much off the side of someone's desk. And again, where we don't carve out a budget and carve out hours and responsibility, there is not an accountability to the standard that I want as a board member. I feel liable for the preparedness, not in the sense about an insurance claim, but in the sense of how much grief I would feel if any incident occurred. You can't just say we're insured if children and our staff are traumatized, possibly injured, possibly killed in the course of an emergency where we did not make progress, adequate progress. I don't think any amount of indemnification really matters. So when I heard that Paul Berry was being assigned as our district safety person, I was very happy. Then when I realized that a significant focus was WCD, I felt inspired again by this earthquake day to say, we must make this a clear plan. And for me, the model that has worked successfully in this district was the district technology plan, a group of experts out in our schools, of users who were not so expert, to talk about what it's like trying to make it work in technology, got together. It was planned, it was budgeted, it was spaced over a 3-year period, and it was followed up and updated on a regular basis. And I would like to see something along similar lines set up, where we are, the first step is to set aside the resources to do the planning. So we know we need some staff time, we need a person responsible, we need some release time probably. That would result in a review and a program and a budget that would say over the next 3 years it will cost us so much dollars per year, and then we can build that into budget. And it will say, and on an ongoing basis, it will take so many hours of staff time every year to do the training, to do the drills, to stay on top of it, to have meetings, to meet a standard. And that is my roundabout way of getting to the motion, to say we cannot let it lapse. It's a grave responsibility. Let us put focused resources in the hands of our superintendent and the staff to get the job done, so that we can confidently say, as trustees, we've done our job.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to that? Fran, and then, or go switch it up, Danny, and then Fran this time.
I have a question, because I think some of this work is already in progress, if I'm not mistaken. Because I did ask the question about the pickaxes and shovels that we were buying. I'm told that somebody is coming up with a budget for earthquake preparedness.
Oh, this is a rumor that's been circulating in the Comox Valley. No, this is a rumor that someone's got wrong. This is a DPAC initiative you're referring to, Danny.
Maybe not Director Morris.
Yeah.
Through the chair. I've had a conversation with Mr. Berry weeks ago about this, and he's well aware of our situation, and he at that time was already working on trying to collect an inventory of what should be in those CCAMs. He's solicited information from other school districts and other sources, and he's building that. And I had a further conversation that once he gets that information together, he's positive that it's fairly accurate, then he'll put some costing against it and present it to us, so we know what to look forward to as far as budget figures go for stocking the CCAMs. He's also looking at identifying some further training for staff. Now, most PVPs and most of my maintenance staff have already had some ACT course on structural safety after an event. The training that he's looking at now is much more in depth. It's a multi-day training, and he's just trying to finalize when and where that is, and he's getting back to me on that as well. That's where we are at this point.
Did you have something to add to that, Sherry?
Maybe what I'd just like to say is that we welcome this initiative from the trustee. We're aware that, and we're aware that as we reflect back on the last number of years, appreciated your terminology, fits and starts. That's pretty accurate for all kinds of reasons, and not about blame or just the circumstances. We as you can tell, we take it seriously. One of the rationales around the position that we just previously discussed was around building a system that is consistent, that is predictable, that has both the ability to implement strategies and a plan, but also has the ability to maintain that plan as it needs to be maintained. So we would welcome the opportunity to draw some resources together, to find some expertise, to develop a training plan, to implement those things, to involve the community and the schools, and bring that back to you. It's part of our work anyway to do. So we welcome this. Now, I couldn't tell you today that we need a staff person above and beyond the health and safety person right now. I can't tell you until we get some current dollars and cents estimates about what the cost could be. We have always committed the resources to earthquake preparedness, even though people might think that we don't, and would probably say that we don't do enough. But it is part of Chuck's budget to continue to support that kind of thing. What we need probably is a bigger, broader picture, a blueprint that we could all point to and know where we are on the map of being prepared, and then how we would maintain it. So there's some stuff going on, but probably not as much as some people would like. And it's certainly not right now in a coordinated place for everybody to find out which direction we're going in. So we'd welcome the opportunity to work on this. Jeff?
I welcome this motion, and I thank Sheila for bringing it forward. I know that at the provincial level, it's something that we all talk about, school safety. I also know, since we've reconfigured the district, now we have elementary schools in 2 stories. So we have a lot of changes in our district, so the timing is just perfect with our reconfiguration and the fact that we have 3 secondary schools, elementary schools on 2 levels, which is new compared to the last time we had the review a few years ago. So I'm looking forward to it. It's very positive, and like I said, I remember the old Courtney Elementary School, the earthquake in 1946, years right now, is that the windows imploded. And if those students were in that school at that time, there would have been serious injuries. And I also remember in Cumberland, because that's when my mother went to high school in Cumberland, was that the lake shifted, and there was actually a tidal wave from the lake, and half the lake went into the water. So it was a substantial earthquake back then, and so I applaud Sheila for bringing this forward, and I'm looking forward to our district moving in a positive manner, making sure our students are safe, along with our staff and our parents. Thank you, Sheila.
You want to say some questions, most of which have been answered. The main one was what we're doing now, and then part 2 is just the motion, which I can't remember, and I'd like to recall hearing it.
It's right there. It's the last paragraph.
Yeah. Oh, in here.
It's the last paragraph.
Okay, thank you. Does that make sense in the context of what we're doing now?
Anyone else? Okay, Sheila, I'm going to shock you here. I am definitely supporting this. This has been something that has been of concern to me for a few years, and you and I both know that we hear about this issue quite a bit as we're out in the schools, and especially at DPAC, and I know that you had a lot to do with the DPAC conversations. I think mostly this is probably about communications. It sounds like there's really good things happening, and that we need to find a way to communicate this out. I think this is a perfect way to do it, Sheila's motion, but I think to make sure that we all put our money where our mouth is, that somebody should make an amendment and add a date to it so we know when this information will be put out. And I'm just wondering, like, we do have a couple of parents that have been very involved at DPAC with this. I know one of them, Kelly Broom, is in the audience here this evening. She's done a lot of research and so forth on processes around emergency preparedness. I know another parent, Daryl Kalman from Airport, his particular area of interest is in equipment and so forth. And they've been both of them have been doing this work for a while, and I think it would be good to go and make a presentation, perhaps even at DPAC, so that parents are aware of what is happening in the district to bring everyone up to speed. So thanks very much for taking this and running with it, Chuck. It's great. Thank you. So I don't know if anybody wants to add a date.
Propose an amendment to include a date of the board meeting in April.
All right. Someone want to second that? Okay, so we'll vote on or any discussion on the amendment to the motion to add with a report by April 2011 board meeting. Janet?
Time frame for, I know they've got you guys have a lot of things to do. Is that going to be okay within your time frame to, okay.
You don't
It'll
do
be a
anything.
first report, and we'll have Mr. Barry probably come and present it. He will be the gatherer.
Perfect. And I'll support the amendment.
Okay, any discussion on the amendment? Okay, so voting on the amendment, all those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Back to the main motion, Sheila. Did you want to close it all, or?
Just to say, I'm definitely appreciative of the work that I know the district staff have been doing and bringing forward, but I wanted to have a discussion and for us to make a statement about how important we are and to let that be a mandate to them to do what they need.
Okay, so everyone's clear on what the motion is? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed, and that is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, next is me, so I guess I'll pass the gavel to our former Vice Chair, Annie White, their virtual gavel. Okay, so I would like to make the motion. So today's Learning for Tomorrow's World, that the board requests that Superintendent Sherry Elwood consult with all levels of staff in order to prepare a comprehensive in-service education plan for the district, including a budget for the board to consider at our February 22nd public board meeting.
Second.
Second.
Thanks.
Your speech, your motion.
Okay, thanks. So you'll notice that the title of this is carefully chosen. It's not called 21st Century Learning because that might be a fad. And as I understand, change efforts, if you go with fads, that's maybe not going to be entirely successful. So Sherry Elwood actually has coined this phrase, and I think it's Sherry that will be driving this forward regardless of what the provincial government says. So I really especially like that. So we have done some things in our district that are really innovative. Curriculum support teachers, one of them. We've had things like mobile computer labs added and smart boards. I had an opportunity to see how the mobile computer lab works at Vanier, so that was pretty cool. But it's more than just technology that we're talking about. We're talking about ways of teaching, ways of thinking about grading, all sorts of things that I can't even begin to imagine because I don't work in a classroom every day. So I've been thinking about this for a while. I believe in lifelong learning, and like Sheila, when I found out there was going to be some extra money, I thought maybe we could grab some of that for some in-service training for staff. So I made the mistake of talking to Len about it, and he said, no, I don't think that that's a good idea. But he did have some ideas if the board would be interested in funding something like this, how it might work. And so this is why I've put the motion the way I have, is that we would send this off to staff to develop a plan. What I'm just really asking is, do people believe in the concept of lifelong learning for teachers and in-service opportunities? They already do a lot of work on their own time. We heard Tamiko speak last time about, she called grab and go Pro D, things that teachers are doing after school. You know, we have Pro D days and so forth, but this would be an additional support. And I think that it is a good idea to have these things. Tom will probably relate to this a bit, that when large organizations want to initiate a change or move something in a particular direction, it makes sense sometimes to spend a little money and make sure everybody's on the same page and has some opportunity to learn what's happening and improve their skills and so forth. So I'm not an expert in this, but I think that we have great staff in the district that can come up with some ideas, and so I would ask that the board support this concept, that we ask staff to draft up a proposal for us to consider at our next meeting. And for me, this would somehow need to be linked to our budget process. So thank you for considering this evening.
I have a problem with this motion, and the problem I have with the motion is our superintendent came to us and said she had a plan, she'd bring a plan forward to us in a time frame that was suited around her needs. So while I agree in principle with supporting our district staff, I have a problem with us that we tell our superintendent to bring a plan on our budget in our time frame, not in her time frame. So I'm a little torn on this one here, because the concept is great, but I just cannot support in that sense. So I will not be voting on this motion this evening.
Has become a theme for me. I would prefer to see this as part of the budget process, just because I think it's difficult when some things are part of the budget process and some aren't. And for the same reasons that not so long ago I mentioned the whole idea about cutting positions as well outside of the process would be a concern. The idea of allocating more funds, even in principle, outside of the budget process, is also a problem for me. So I have a different type of concern, and I would like to see it just in the budget process and not for us to consider separately.
Thanks, Danny. Yeah, I think I agree with Fran about the budget process, and I would certainly have some concerns about February 22nd as a date at this point if we were passing it today at such a short time frame. I would be really interested in having this sort of information part of an education committee meeting. If I'm understanding this, we would be discussing what type of in-service and new training would be needed to help our staff adapt or to share good ideas in terms of a new curriculum. And I think in some ways we might be a little bit early on that. I mean, we've been hearing lots of good practices, and we've been hearing lots, but we're still in a position where the ministry hasn't given us a lot of direction yet about what they're going to do on curriculum. I understand they're working on cutting parts of the outcomes so that there'll be more flexibility. The capacity to do today's learning for tomorrow's world is going to depend on certain changes in our curriculum, certain barriers that need to be removed. Are we ready to do an in-service to bring us forward if some of our basic structural situations haven't changed? I feel like I need more information from you about how the process is moving down the line, and that would include how people will be preparing to make changes and how we might be shifting high school structures or distance ed and all sorts of other things that will come along that will require the training. So I feel like I'm still missing a little piece of the puzzle, and would like to have more information brought to the education committee meeting about that. What's it going to look like? What are these shifts going to be looking like? And what will be the training that they'll need? And is it training that happens outside of the normal professional development that you're doing? I don't know. Is it special?
When the board chair initially approached me about this, of course I said it was a good idea, because we actually are supporting with our own budgets right now in this current year all kinds of staff development for teachers that are interested. Tomiko came and Joe, the Google app workshop, for example, which was very well attended again today at the Professional Development Day. So with whether or not the ministry moves or not, but we have come to the conclusion, and in fact there is a guiding document. It did come out. We have heard from the ministry, and it came out on December 18th. It came out under the auspices of the Premier's Council on Technology, which is why nobody read it, and why it didn't say something about 21st century learning. One would question. But there is a guiding document at this point in time, and the good news is it is exactly what we had hoped it would be. It's not directive. It's not directive in that you must and thou shalt do. It speaks to the processes that need to be in place for learning in the future and what the expectation of the ministry is around the difference between learning process and product-based learning. So the product-based learning is about those things that they're saying that they're going to streamline. Now, of course, life changed in Victoria about 3 or 4 months ago, and everything is a little like the Wizard of Oz land. So we're not totally sure who's in charge of education and all of those things. What we know is that we've had such overwhelming response to the things that we've been able to fund this year that they're double, triple booked. And we would love an opportunity for everyone just to have some broad-based staff development that they're not having to use their own professional development funds for and their own release time for. So, of course, when the board chair talked to me, would you have a plan? I have a plan in my head already, and that's what Trustee Clayton is referring to, and I have said that to you, about the kinds of in-service and staff development that we could offer teachers to find themselves in the landscape, like for them to find some comfort level in as we move ahead. And then it would become more sophisticated over the course of a couple of years. So, would it be different and more special? Yes, it would be. Would it be something that they perhaps could find somewhere else? Yes, but they would then be using their own resources to do it. And I truly believe we have an obligation as the employer to provide them with that basic level, entry level discussion and perhaps skill acquisition, if that's what they're interested in, to get them to a place where they can find themselves in that landscape and understanding that in the broad-based perspective, they would not be committing their own resources to that, that we would honor their willingness to engage in the change by providing them with those resources. So of course I said yes. We are only able to just skim the surface on what we really like to do in our own budgets because Lord Douglas continues to spend all of my money in my budget. And I don't know how
Well spent. It's all well spent.
So we absolutely could. Now, we weren't, until I had this conversation with the board chair, I would be saying to you that in my head I thought I'd be putting something forward to you in a budget process that would be asking you to consider supporting a staff development plan. And that would be for all staff. It would be for QP staff that are involved. It would be for teachers. It would be for administrators. And mostly it's around the fact that the things that we have offered so far have been so overwhelmingly subscribed that we haven't been able to stretch our budgets any farther, and we wish we could. So it is about good practice and process, and it isn't because it's just about 21st century learning. It isn't at all. And whether or not the government said on paragraph 35, I'm not a real big fan of listening anyway, but that isn't the driver about what it is. It's about hearing from the field this appetite for this kind of staff development. They're saying we want more. So that was my response to the board chair. When she said, would this work, and do you think you'd find participation? And I went, oh yeah. We've already experienced that so far in the 4 or 5 months that we've been offering what we've been offering. We just don't have the ability to resource it the way we like to in our own budget. So that's where it came from.
So I like the motion in particular that we declare and support comprehensive in-service educational plan. I think that's reasonable for any organization, certainly organization our size. I did hear, and I appreciate Fran's and others' comments about the budget, but I thought I heard in your presentation that it was to be folded into the bigger budget piece. So I didn't read this as on February 22nd, and I'll pause a moment on that, but just on February 22nd that we would be making a budgetary decision. We would be looking at the plan, and then I would see a potential recommendation to, yes, we like this, folded into the bigger process as opposed to. So that's within that spirit that I would be supporting the motion. I also didn't see anybody flinch over there on the February 22nd date, and you've helped me understand that because clearly there's been some pre-thought, and so I'm fine with supporting the motion as it is.
I think from my point of view, now I've got the clarification that we're not going to be approving that as chair of the finance committee. I'm quite happy to approve a plan coming forth. So I here to go speak.
Yeah, I just did want to clarify the two things, that this isn't meant to support the ministry's direction, although I'm sure that we'll be compelled to at some point. But this is meant to support what is evolving from staff in our district and to engage other people in the conversation, teachers, QP, principals, vice principal, with respect to what they would like to learn about. And also that, yes, clearly it is not for us to make a decision on February 22nd. On February 22nd, we would have an opportunity to hear about this and see if this is something we felt should go to the budget process. And I did sort of come up with that date because I'm kind of aware that we're going to be having to pass the budget relatively soon. So that's where that came from. So please consider supporting this. I think this would be a really good opportunity for staff in our district to have some support from the board.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Okay, next up is Fran.
Just a question. Can I change the date in the motion as it's printed?
So,
or I make the motion?
You can change it entirely. This is just a recommendation, so read something different if you like.
I would move that the board direct senior staff to provide the board with recommendations as to the development of the School District 71 Code of Conduct with a report to the board by the March board meeting.
Okay, we have a seconder. Do you want to open debate, Fran?
During the election campaign process, which in some ways seems so long ago and yet so recently as well, I was asked a question, and specifically what I would do to bring civility back to the board table. And at the time I answered, civility breeds civility, and somewhat simplistically believed that was true, and it was that simple. In looking back and in thinking about this, I think that civility by example, although necessary, isn't sufficient. And so I'd like to propose that we regularize respectful behavior and civil discourse in black and white by way of policy as a first step. I also want to point out that I'm not talking about just trustees. I'm talking about everyone in any way connected to School District 71. So beginning with trustees who need to lead by example and extending to include all members of the educational community, no matter how far-reaching. Over the past few years, I've had a number of people advise me that they refuse to attend certain meetings because of behavior of other adults at those meetings. I've never seen a student behave disrespectfully in any public forum, any meeting, and I, in some ways, am hesitant about allowing students to see how some adults sometimes behave. I did, just for fun, a brief look at some school district codes of conduct, and came across one Toronto District School Board that I particularly liked. There's a separate policy mandating a respectful educational community for everyone, and then a more specific code of conduct for trustees. And put simply, I'm paraphrasing somewhat from the Toronto District School Board, we simply need to behave in a way that enhances public education and refrain from behaving in a way that's detrimental to public education, and that's really the bottom line. And I don't think that's a bad thing, a bad message to be sending to everyone, whether it's a parent having an argument about parking, and I understand that there are extremely heated discussions about that, many of which wouldn't meet the standard of a code of conduct. So I'm just talking about an across-the-board general code. And I think if we do nothing, we're tacitly accepting disrespectful behavior. And what comes with disrespectful behavior, I think, is a lot of wasted time and energy and resources. So if we attempt to at least enshrine the need for respect and civility in the form of policy, we've made a start. And I'm not saying that we're going to be, or that we even can have a policy with teeth where we're going to start regulating. But I think in terms of sending out the message, and another one of my themes has been education as opposed to regulation. And I think this is an overarching topic that's in the news a lot these days, well beyond the confines of our school district. And so, why not?
Thanks. Anyone else like to speak? Jess?
So, in principle, Fran, I agree that all boards should have a code of conduct. But in fact, we already do. There is a code of conduct in the School Act under Section 67.5. Talks about the Board of Education to establish procedures governing the conduct of its meetings. We also have in the School Act regarding parents participating at school meetings where school boards can actually eject persons from the school board meeting if they feel their conduct is inappropriate. So there already is an outreach there. We also have, under Policy Manual, Policy 1005, Trustee Rights and Responsibility. Number 2, conduct about ourselves. Voice opinions and perspectives in an open and respectful manner, and have such opinions, perspectives respected by fellow trustees and district staff. And that we're able to vote issues free from pressure and lobbying for other trustees in the district. So there is a policy dealing with us. We also have policy 6020 R1 talking about student behavior, which talks about the code of conduct of students. And I actually pulled about them from, I have Highlands, I have Isfields, I have Vannies, I have Coke. They all have where students have a code of conduct. So we already have something in place for our students. We also have a harassment prevention policy, which talks about code of conduct of our staff and our teachers in a respectful manner. We also have a wonderful policy developed March 27, 2007, regarding safe and caring orderly schools, talked about code of conduct and with parents, that includes parents, staff, and students, and the public. And I think we have those already in place. We just have to maybe know that they're there, read them, and apply them to what we're doing. So I think we have policies in place already that deal with it. They're there already. And I personally, this is my personal opinion, I'm a democratically elected member, public official. The public has the right to ask me questions. If I'm uncomfortable with those questions, that's my problem. I think that I have to be held accountable for what I do, and I have to be accountable to the public. And I have a brother serving in Afghanistan right now, fighting for democracy, and I will not support anything that allows me not to speak my mind in a respectful meeting at a public board meeting. And that's just my thoughts on the matter.
Tom?
So I want to thank Fran for having this item for discussion. I would ask for some clarification because I'm not really sure what the motion is asking. Because how I read it is provide the board with recommendations as to the development of. So are we asking? Would we be asking senior staff to tell us whether it's a good idea or not, or are you looking?
That's what I was envisioning, because I see this need personally, but because policy is within the scope of senior management to have a look at this based on these concerns and based on how the discussion goes tonight. So it's not directing them, and that was quite specific, not to direct them to do this, but to ask them to.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Jill?
Yeah, I'm a little confused why this would be a direction to senior staff to recommend policy rather than a referral to the policy committee to review our existing policies. And that's a group where senior management and trustees have a discussion about whether what we already have in place is sufficient. I have a number of concerns that from time to time people find themselves on different sides of the table or different sides of the debate, and that there's always a matter of interpreting whether something's respectful or not. And I hate to see additional rules and regulations coming in as a way to control discourse that we just don't happen to like or agree with. And I think that efforts to control people's discourse and input on the basis of its merits, I entirely agree about style. I think that personal comments and attacks should be off the table. I think we have guidelines in place already. We have Robert's Rules of Order to help us in that. But it is so easy to define a challenge to a ruling or perspective or information, a request, an insistence on one's right, to interpret that as disrespectful if you don't happen to agree with it. And I think that's a very slippery slope to go down, and I don't want to be involved in seeing that at all. I hate to see us come to a place where some overarching goal of being nice precludes us from having to be accountable for legitimate questions that are being put forward in an intent to understand the situation and reach a better agreement. So I'm not convinced of the need for additional code of conduct than we already have, while I agree with the desire for civility and respectfulness in our conversations. And I'm not convinced that this particular motion would be a good way to deal with it. I think a referral to a policy committee would be more appropriate and in keeping with it being the board's business.
Well, I am going to support this motion. I think that it would be entirely appropriate for us to forward this to staff to survey all of the policies and things that we have on the books already. Janice, I guess you're right. There is something in the School Act, but it's not a code of conduct. All it says is we can kick people out of meetings. That's kind of a harsh way of dealing with people. I think if there's any sort of disputes. And it does say that we should be developing codes of conduct. Is that what it was, 67.5? Is that what you said?
We already have them.
So I'm not sure that what we have is adequate. What I would like to see us have is something adequate so that when the third Saturday of November of this year occurs, that whoever is elected, that our staff has the ability to sit down with them and say, this is how we do stuff at School District 71. Here's our code of conduct. This is generally how we get along with each other. So they at least get a running start as to getting along well with each other. And then I think it does flow from there. I think our schools have codes of conduct. We have bullying policies and so forth that seem to apply to students, but I don't really see anything in the district that does apply to the adults. But maybe I'm wrong about that, and this is why I would appreciate staff doing some work with regards to this, to survey it and bring that information back to us. I think we could use that. Sherry?
Maybe, and I don't want to, if there's more discussion, but if we could see some pretty finite clarification so that if we do go away and do this, we have an opportunity to at least meet your needs around this one. It's a bit of an awkward thing for us to do, so we want to make sure that it fits. So can I just capture so far what I think I've heard?
Yeah, thank you.
It's my understanding so far what I've heard is that the recommendation after the development of a School District 71 Code of Conduct, am I correct in believing that that Code of Conduct right now in its initial discussion today would be for all, I've heard a couple things, so all people involved in the educational community, that's what I heard initially, or are we speaking specifically about adults? Because it will make our discourse be different, right? Because we do have codes of conduct in our schools, and so are we looking for something that is universally applied across the spectrum of students, parents, interested community members, people who come to a public forum, trustees, senior staff, all staff? Because we'll need some help around that, because that will change perhaps some of the information we bring to you. So I heard that, so I need some clarification about that, and it probably that speaks to the philosophical intent, and I appreciate this, Trustee Goldberg, that was the starting point, but I heard some other pieces now tonight. So does it apply to all adults, or just adults only, or a broader community? I think I heard that perhaps what we brought back to you would speak to what would the process of development of something like this look like? Are you asking that we would say to you that in the planning process for something like this, you would probably consider a consultation process that looks like this, a summarizing process like this, a prioritizing process, like how to go about doing it? You're not asking us to write it. You're asking us to plan the process of the development of a code of conduct. Am I correct?
I would think that in the context of what our policy manual says, the policy on policy 1001, that this would be staff's work to write an initial draft of something and bring it back to the board to see if this is what the board had in mind, and then if there's further discussion or consultation required, then it would go to the policy committee. The rest of the board may not agree with that, and that's fine, but I would say at first blush that's what it would look like.
Suggestion about process as well, recommendation about process, about how you would consult with the stakeholder groups, because if this is broad enough to involve everyone, my assumption is that you'd want some consultation from the stakeholder groups that are affected, or that would be affected by this. When we develop a code of conduct, for example, in the school, there's a whole process that's in play. Students, parents, community members are involved in the development, staff members are involved in the development of code of conduct. So I guess would we ask you then, would we make some recommendations to you about the process of that one? The third thing I think I heard was that, and I guess we would need some clarification on what would the end product look like for you? Because that will drive both the process and what we might recommend to you. So we can do some preliminary work, but what the end product would look like and who it pertains to will show the complexity of the work that we need to provide you with. And then the last thing was, and I think it might be beneficial for, as Trustee Caton has highlighted, there are some bits and pieces of this in the various amounts of legislation and all that, and we can certainly gather that all together for you and put it together in one document and say, does any of this meet what your initial need is. And then the final question I would have for you, when we get to a place where this, is this for you to have a philosophical conversation with and come to consensus as a board that this is something that you want to embrace? Or do we need that at the beginning before we go down the path? Because I haven't heard that.
You feel like addressing any of that, since this was your...
This has turned out to be much more complex and
Sorry.
controversial. No,
We want to get, we need to know where you're coming from.
I was coming from a place of asking you, what do you think? To all of those questions, I would prefer not to determine today in a quick discussion what an end product would look like, whether it would include adults and students or any of the other questions. I would like you to, if there's an appetite to look at this, a code of conduct, to look at the issue and say, yes, this makes sense because here are the gaps in the legislation, or this doesn't make sense. And if it does make sense, to provide direction to Policy Advisory Committee, to come back to the board. We'd like to send this to Policy Advisory Committee to sort out some of the philosophical issues, or whatever you think. So I actually would prefer not to answer those questions and to allow you to provide us with your recommendations based on what you know and what you'll learn in the process.
And what we've interpreted as your ask. Because that's the whole purpose of my questions, wasn't to be awkward about that. We need to understand your ask, because this hasn't come from us. We haven't seen the need for a code of conduct that is district-wide. So we want to make sure that if we're going to do this work, that we're catching your ask appropriately. So as you say, what do we think? There's a part of me, and I'm not being smart. I'm saying, what do you think as a board? Are you thinking this is what you want, and what would it look like for you? And then we can build it, design it, plan it, facilitate. Right? So that was the reason for the question.
So this is the limitations of having a discussion here in sort of 10 quick minutes about quite a meaty topic. Len?
If I could, maybe just to help me too. So I think if we pass this motion, what I would normally expect is we talk about bring back to you a 2 or 3 paragraph. Here's what the policies and regulations to be developed, and that would be the second piece that goes off to the policy advisory committee probably, and maybe the staff, however you want to see it. But is that what we're trying to get to?
Yeah, that would, whatever you think. Like again, it's just completely open and new, so would like some direction, and would certainly expect not too much work to be put in at the first step, because if you make a recommendation and then the board has no appetite to go there, then you won't have wasted time researching and doing too much. Sheila?
I actually think that maybe we're not ready to make a decision about this, and I'm thinking that we are having a meeting to talk about items around the your list of the outstanding governance items, and that seems like a place where we might have some of this philosophical discussion about whether it's needed and what are we trying to achieve. I have a real concern that it's coming out of discomfort about a level of discourse where people are on different sides. Is it viewed as discourse or disputes about process and information, or is there varying levels of acceptance of that? And I don't know that we're ready to have a policy that addresses those. So much of it is subjective sense of what's appropriate and what's valid in the course of the work that we do, whether it's communication amongst ourselves or with the public. And I think that we would do well to use one of our upcoming opportunities that we're planning to do some work and talk more about this before we give a direction to senior management. It's one that I think might be more appropriate to go to the policy committee, but I think we need to have more discussion beforehand on really, is it needed at all? Are we
making progress around some of the issues that will lead to this type of what may appear to some to be hostile and confrontational, and to others to be perfectly reasonable debate.
So I think what I'm hearing Fran say is that she is asking staff to kind of make a recommendation. I guess it's perfectly possible that they could come back and say, actually, we have this and that, and it's handled, and we don't need this anymore. Anybody else have any thoughts about where to go on this? Fran?
I just want to clarify some of the other comments.
Okay.
So first of all, in terms of existing legislation and policy, I definitely did check it out before putting this forward, and found it more general or dealing with extremes. I think that we do require codes of conduct for individual schools. So to me, it seems somewhat hypocritical to have a requirement at that level and not at this level. Because if the expectation is that they have to develop it, why shouldn't we? And also to clarify, I'm surprised, but I'm glad that people have been candid about mentioning concerns, believing or worrying that I'm trying to quell democracy or respectful debate in any way, and that's certainly not my intent, which I have to really underline. I'm not trying to control questions I don't like. I can deal quite comfortably with different sides and different opinions. As many of you know, I was a litigator, and that was part of my daily life, dealing with debate and discussion on different sides. I don't think it's disagreement and being nice are mutually exclusive. And that's all I'm saying, is that discourse and disagreement needs to be respectful. I'm not in any way trying to shut down discussion or disagreement or difference of opinion, because otherwise this job would be completely meaningless if it was just everybody agrees with everything. So I just really want to underscore that's not what I'm saying at all. And I think to the contrary, and that maybe going too far here, but to the contrary, I think that democracy is actually threatened by lack of civility. And I think that there are people who don't want to attend meetings or vote or become involved in politics at all sorts of levels because of the lack of civility. So I think that it's important for democracy. And now I'll stop because I'm really extending into deeper waters here.
I don't know, I think I might even extend myself into deeper waters and think about when I was on the board, the last board, and we had some public meetings where they got pretty raucous. And, the anti-board people had a good opportunity to speak, and I think that sometimes the people that were there that were in agreement with what the board of the day was doing didn't have an opportunity to speak, and it was difficult for them. So I'm thinking about those kinds of opportunities for people to participate, and they might be intimidated if they feel that they're going to be chastised for their position. So that's my concluding thought. So we have a motion on the floor here. You can either vote on it or refer it to the Education Committee or something. So I still stand as it is. Okay, any further discussion on the motion? So the motion is that the board directs senior staff to provide the board with recommendations as to the development of an SB 71 code of conduct with a report to the board by the March 2011 board meeting. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? And that is defeated. Okay, we'll move on to correspondence. We have 2 items of board information.
first one is with respect to appropriate for student learning. Anyone wish to make any comments about that? Well, I think it's interesting that the government assigns their superintendent achievement to comment on interpretation of the word appropriate that is contained in their legislation. I find it offensive that they would sort of defer that to the superintendent in the district and set aside their obligation to say what appropriate is. I feel that, maybe we should commission a report that it articulates what exactly optimal class size and composition is, so that the next time we have a Bill 33 report in front of us, we can actually comment on that based on an educational research perspective instead of a budget perspective. So I'm a little offended by the letter that we got back.
So you're speaking for yourself, right, not the board?
Always, that's how it is, Jen.
For clarification, thank you.
Okay, and then the supporting neighborhoods of learning. Anyone wish to make a comment about that?
I'd just like to give a little update on behalf of the program at Lake Trail that they are thrilled, and the garden is proceeding very fast, but they have also been able to, in partnership with the Boys and Girls Club, get a grant for $30,000 to look at ways to work with the Boys and Girls Club and other partners who are serving children and families in the area to use the school and to develop more programs to work in that area. So extremely exciting, and that opportunity came because of the leverage of the first two grants, that the original SCC grant, the second one that they're still in, as well as this garden. So it is for a startup group started in a pack. It's a pretty amazing result for that school. Very, very exciting. And they do have a website now. It's Lake Trail Connect.ca. Yeah. Very exciting.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Quick question about
Tim?
the Royston one. Didn't we recommend $12,500 for each of them?
Jill's got it.
Through you, Madam Chair. Basically, there was a piece of the grant that was ineligible because it spent money on supplies, and this one was focused on either consultation or renovation.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, we have 7 minutes left, or 8 minutes left for questions and inquiries. Anyone wish to ask questions, Heather?
I would like to remind the board about the 3 annual drills that are documented in the school district annual manual, that are more than a block cover on drills that can be in the schools.
Thanks. Thanks for your work on emergency preparedness. Anyone else? Shelley Gaillard.
Have something I thought I'd like to read, and I'll have some questions. The document that Trustee Bard put forward September 25th, 2007, I'd like to read this excerpt. The public have elected us to be the representatives in the public education system of the Comox Valley. As our employers, they have a right to ask us for answers, and we have a duty to make that information available to them. So in that same vein, would you please tell us where the initial meeting with Mr. Scott was conducted, the name of the firm for which you sought legal counsel, and what questions did you pose to this lawyer before awarding the contract for the operational review?
Do you have the question in writing there? As you may know, we're working with a facilitator at this time with respect to a number of issues, and I think that I would be most comfortable with the board as a whole providing a response to that. And if you could give us that question, please, we will take it to our next session with our facilitator and arrange for the board to agree on an answer to your question. Thank you. Anyone else? Shanna?
This question was for the last one, but then carried over here. But so during the last board meeting, which we did two times ago now,
new trustee Barr indicated that trustee Weber had held secret meetings himself, and in a newspaper article, you also indicated that trustee Caton had made a request to have a trustee-only meeting. Through you, Madam Chair, would these trustees care to explain?
Our board procedural bylaws allow for questions to be put through the chair to any member of the board or staff. So it was me speaking to the media, but...
I have no problem answering. I requested a meeting. After meeting the board chair and the superintendent, I sat down. I had some concerns regarding the relationship amongst the board. I expressed my concerns to the superintendent and the board chair, and the superintendent suggested that maybe the 7 of us got together and had a conversation. That was my meeting. So senior staff is aware of the meeting, as actually she suggested that we actually sit down and talk. So that was for that meeting in the paper.
Thank you.
So I think I provided my response, and also in a media item where I commented I'm not sure what the board chair was referring to. So refer the media person back to her.
How are those meetings the same as the initial meeting with Mr. Sprott?
You can, I think, hear from the meeting tonight that we meet to discuss things in a variety of ways. Trustee Caton talked about having a conversation about something with the superintendent. Superintendent and I had a conversation about the item that I put on the agenda in the absence of other trustees. Had also a discussion with Glenn with respect to that. Business gets transacted in a number of different ways, and if people feel that every conversation that we ever have about board business is done right here in full view, you can see how difficult that would be
Just you
to do.
yourself made the parallel that meeting with Mr. Sprott you felt was no different than the other meetings. And I personally seem to think, Trustee Caton has explained what hers was, and that doesn't sound anything similar to what this other meeting was.
I think what's difficult is that we seem to be going over old ground, and if you could please refer that question back, I think that I would like to have an opportunity for the board to have a discussion with respect to your question with our facilitator. So if you could both give your questions to Debbie Page, I would appreciate it. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. We'll have a motion to adjourn now, please. Second? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you.